Uh, this is my project on bookmaking. My name is Kenneth. I'm a senior at Marq, and this is my 6th year here also. I have 130 hours in this project. My notes say years, but whatever. My driving question is, how can someone grade a book? And my sustainability question is, are books more sustainable than e-readers? My sustainability question, like I just said, are books more sustainable than e-readers? And I have looked into 2 parts for this, which is the materials needed to make e-readers and books, and also the transportation of both. Starting off with the materials, to make e-readers, you need around 33 pounds of materials. That also includes toxic materials to humans and animals. And it also takes 79 gallons of water to produce those materials, and also the factories that make the e-readers. Books, on the other hand, use only 2/3 of a pound of materials and only 2 gallons of water. But on the other hand, major book production needs a lot of trees to be harvested for a lot of books. For example, in 2008, 125 million trees were harvested just for books. Transportation of electronics are produced in different countries, which means that your e-reader has been shipped from a different country all the way into your hands. And needed to do that, it needed to be shipped or flown across an ocean or a larger body of water, and then transported into a truck all the way to your house or your hands, or both, I guess. On the other hand, books are a little more confusing. Ones that are purchased online are more or less the same as an e-reader, made in a different country or made in the US, shipped to your hands, so on and so forth. But the ones that are purchased in a bookstore are shipped there in bulk or drove there in bulk, which makes it better on the environment. But unfortunately, 25 to 36% of the books that are shipped to bookstores are usually shipped back to the seller and needed to be disposed of or shipped to, again, another bookstore to be resold, which is a massive amount of energy and just fuel and just resources that I don't think we can really waste. And the usage, like, the last thing is the usage, which really just depends on the user. Overall, if you read like 1 or 2 books a year, stick with like paperback books and just like covered books. And if you read like hundreds of books a year, which I don't know many people that do that, stick to an e-reader. The more books you read, it's better to stick with an e-reader. If you read a little amount of books, stick to books. Or the chances of authors becoming successful. So I looked into a few authors specifically that have made it famous and their struggles to becoming that famous and successful. The first person I looked into was James Patterson, who made $94 million in 2012. And he is one of the 145,000 American writers and authors. A quarter of them working part-time, and 2/3 of them are self-employed with a median salary of $55,000. After some research, I have concluded that like many people are curious in the success rate of authors and writers, and reports show that more than 80% of Americans would like to become an author, including in 2012, statistics counted 329,000 books published in the United States and 2.2 million books published worldwide. Overall, most successful authors have some combination of talent, persistence, and luck. For example, Janet Evanovich, who pulled in $33 million in 2012, But before she was able to do that, she was writing books for 10 years without making any money and just kept on putting books in, but getting no result back until after 10 years in her career. Stephen King's first big novel, Carrie, was rejected 30 times from publishing houses, and he tossed it in the garbage before having it fished out by his wife, who eventually got him to publish it. J.K. Rowling, also known as the first author billionaire, had Harry Potter rejected by a dozen British publishing houses and reportedly got into print for a £1,500 fine advance, only after the 8-year-old daughter of a publisher pleaded for the book to be published. Also, other featured authors are C.S. Lewis, got rejected 800 times, and Western writer Louis Lamar 200 times. Even the Diary of Anne Frank got rejected numerous times. 3. What are some ways writers bind their books? Case binding, also known as section sewing, is commonly used for hardcover books that have more than 80 pages. This is also one of the most expensive of the 3 that I'm going to be talking about. Perfect binding. Perfect binding usually is commonly found in commercially produced paperback books, for example, like magazines, and are generally cheaper than case binding, but not as cheap as saddle stitch binding. Speaking of saddle stitch binding, that's going to lead me into saddle stitch binding. Saddle stitch binding is one of the most common types of binding that you'll find. It is suitable for self-covered books, which means that the cover is made of the same material that is the inside of the books. And it also is used to make covered books, which is a different cover material than the inside pages, like most of the books you would find over there. Self-covered books are also magazines, so yeah. And this type of stitching is usually best for approximately like 90 pages. Is it easier to write a fiction or a nonfiction book? Typically, it is easier to write a nonfiction book due to the fact that you don't need to make your own plot ending or even the whole story, due to the fact that it already happened and you're just recalling certain events. There's a chance, though, that it just really depends that on the author itself, because some people might find it easier to write the whole book instead of like the whole fiction story, like the plot, the ending, the beginning, instead of actually recalling specific events, because that is just how they are. And also, in an instance, it's more difficult to actually tell events without adding your own little flair to it to make the book more interesting, but eventually leads the book into like some sort of like sci-fi alien story. What are some of the tactics that authors use to write nonfiction books? I have all of these, but the 2 that are highlighted are the ones I'm going to be talking about. The same for the next slide, so if you want to learn them all, come talk to me after. The first one is creating your book outline. An outline is a system that helps you organize your thoughts and ideas, which overall makes your book easier to write. A book outline is kind of like a map. It can always lead you to where you want to go. For example, if you start going off a track, you can always go back to the outline and get yourself back on track. Find some beta readers. Beta readers help you see the story from another set of eyes. If you're a writer, let's face it, you don't have the necessary emotional distance to critique your own book as harshly as some other people would. And for the same reason that you need an editor, you also need a beta reader to give you an unbiased feedback on your book. What are some tactics authors use to write fiction books? Nailing down the story idea. You want to be able to get the story idea big and bold. You don't want to start the book without knowing what the plot is, the beginning, etc., or the book would end up all over the place. This would be helpful if you also put this down in the book outline so you would know where everything is. Read books in your genre. you would want to read books in your genre so you know what worked for some people and what didn't work for others. So you get a general idea of what you want to avoid and what you want to do to make your book like to increase the chance of your book becoming successful. Develop your main characters. Uh, strong character development is one of the most important aspects of writing a fiction novel. With strong character development, your characters will be more memorable, and more importantly, your readers will be able to relate to them, and just as if they were a real human being. Develop your main. I already said that. Establish a writing routine. Establishing a writing routine helps you be able to get into a mindset, at least like whenever you decide to write your book, because after a while your mind starts getting to the mindset of, okay, in like 25 minutes I'm going to start writing for an hour, and your body just gets like more calm and relaxed while writing that book, so you're in like that writer's mindset. And dice sources, and thanks. Any questions? Which I don't know if we're doing questions.